Hello, and a very warm welcome to you. Thanks for joining us.
Hi, everyone.
Today, we're diving deep into a topic that, well, it's often confusing and can be really painful. Narcissism.
Hmm.
You've shared a fantastic collection of articles with us looking into narcissistic personality disorder, NPD, and its impact, especially in relationships.
Yeah, some really insightful pieces.
So, our mission today is to unpack some of these complex ideas. We want to try and separate, the myths from the reality, or at least the more nuanced reality that these sources present.
Absolutely. Giving you the key insights to understand this
Yeah?
often misunderstood condition.
We'll be looking at things like, do narcissists actually feel guilt? What's really going on inside their minds? What about shame? That seems key. And projection as a defense mechanism.
Lots to cover. Hopefully you'll get some surprising perspectives, maybe a few aha moments along the way.
Definitely. And it's crucial, like you said, to see narcissism isn't just one simple thing.
No, not at all. The sources you've given us show a real range, from behaviors you can see to those internal struggles you can't. We'll try to weave those together for a fuller picture.
Okay, let's jump right in then. The big question, do narcissists feel guilty? I know that's something many people grapple with. The Psychology Today article tackles this head-on.
It does. And it suggests that if someone with NPD shows regret, it might not be coming from empathy, feeling bad for hurting someone.
So what's the proposed reason then?
The idea put forward is that the regret is more about losing something they value. And the article even suggests they might see people as, well, as possessions.
Wow, that's a heavy concept. Being seen as a possession, so they might act like they care.
Right, they might feign care, as the article puts it, but underneath, maybe they don't genuinely feel what others feel, not in the same way. The insight there is that apparent regret could be rooted in self-interest.
That fits with some core NPD traits, like difficulty with empathy.
It does. But, and this is important, this is one perspective. The epistemology article offers a different angle, maybe more complicated one.
Ah, okay. So how does that one see it?
Well, this piece suggests that people with NPD do actually suffer consequences. They have internal battles. It's not like they're just sailing through unaffected.
So not psychopaths in that sense, untouched by it all.
Exactly. Epistemology argues they aren't psychopaths. They apparently have doubts, maybe a conscience of sorts. They second-guess themselves. They might experience a lot of anxiety, depression, feelings of mania, worthlessness, frustration. A constant internal struggle is how it's described.
That paints a very different picture. An internal world full of insecurity and pain, contrasting sharply with that often confident, even arrogant exterior. How does that work?
Well, the article talks about a possible coping mechanism, maybe starting in childhood. If a child is constantly put down or berated, they might develop a way to just tune it out, an emotional numbing almost. It even suggests this could lead to a kind of rewiring of the brain to create distance from that pain.
That's fascinating. The article gives examples too, right? Like Max.
Yeah, Max, who apparently showed this manic excitement in new relationships, really intense, followed quickly by suicidal thoughts. It highlights that potential instability.
Such extreme.
It really underscores the potential volatility. And then there's a comment from someone called Rick who says he has NPD.
Oh, interesting. What does he say?
He describes being cunning and vindictive, but masking it with a clean image. And he connects this directly back to what he calls a hellish childhood. So that adds another layer of the possible link to early experiences.
But it's not unanimous. We got comments pushing back, didn't we? Like Kay Keaty.
Right. Kay Keaty argues strongly that narcissists know the harm they cause, that they're pros at gaslighting and manipulation.
Yeah.
They even suggest some might meet psychopathy criteria.
Which really shows the different, sometimes conflicting experiences people have. It's not one size fits all.
Definitely not. And Alice points out narcissism is part of the dark triad, often co-occurring with Machiavellianism and psychopathy. So these things can overlap.
And then there was that comment from Jane. Very direct.
Yeah, I am a narc, still struggling to change myself, but never works.
That's a powerful personal perspective on the struggle and the difficulty of change.
It really is. And the anonymous comment, too, describing that pattern we hear about so often.
The love bombing. Intense at first.
Followed by the rapid devaluation, blame, attacks on self-esteem, control.
Exactly. And the comment mentioned the partner wanting an open relationship after the breakup, seemingly, as the commenter felt, just for an ego boost. These stories really hit home, showing the real impact.
Absolutely. Okay, so let's shift a bit. How are these behaviors maintained? Let's talk defense mechanisms. The Frontiers article seems key here.
Yes, it talks about maladaptive defenses,
Right.
basically unhealthy coping strategies like projection, which we mentioned, and splitting. But what's really useful is its distinction between grandiose narcissism, GN, and vulnerable narcissism, VN.
Right, so it's not just one monolithic thing, two main types or presentations. Exactly. And they seem quite different. The article links GN with generally better psychosocial functioning. People might seem more successful, more outgoing,
Okay.
whereas VN is linked more with neuroticism, distress, depression, anxiety, lower life satisfaction.
Hmm.
So understanding this difference is really important. Their inner worlds and outer behaviors can look quite distinct.
And VN is also linked to having more trouble using healthy ways to manage emotions.
That's what it suggests. Interestingly, the study they mentioned looked at healthy individuals and didn't find a direct link between having narcissistic traits,
Hmm.
either type, and someone's actual ability to regulate emotions. However,
There's always a however.
well, yeah, it found that people high in vulnerable narcissism tend to use suppression more often, trying to bottle up or ignore their emotions, which is generally seen as maladaptive, unhealthy long-term.
Okay, that makes sense. Push it down. What about the grandiose type?
They seem to do the opposite with positive emotions, actually. They tend not to suppress positive feelings.
Right, they might want to amplify those good feelings, maybe. Fits the image.
It seems plausible. The article also mentions the narcissism spectrum model. It frames VN as being more avoidance-oriented, sensitive to threats, whereas GN is more approach-oriented, sensitive to rewards.
So, one is trying to avoid pain, the other chasing gain in a simplified way.
Kind of, yeah. The main point is that distinguishing between these presentations is vital, both for researchers and, for anyone trying to understand or help.
That distinction feels really important. Okay, let's dig into an emotion that seems central here. Shame. The Understanding Narcissism and Shame article explores this deeply.
Yes, it calls shame a premier social emotion for narcissists, but one that's often masked by that false self, that air of superiority.
So the arrogance is a cover.
That's the idea. A cover for deep insecurities they feel ashamed of. This outward show hides what's underneath, so a key insight. The arrogance might be defensive.
And envy comes into play, too.
Yeah, linked to those insecurities and poor self-worth. It drives them to denigrate others, put them down, but apparently that doesn't actually get rid of the underlying shame.
It's like a cycle. And if the shame isn't acknowledged,
It can lead to what the article calls shamelessness, manifesting as lack of compassion, rage, grandiosity. It also strongly links this deep shame back to childhood trauma. A shame-based caretaker, as they put it, can create a really damaging foundation.
and then in adulthood, when something triggers that old shame, it feels like a threat to their whole image.
Exactly. Brings back those old feelings of abuse, potentially leading to that aggressive shame rage response.
We saw reflections of this in the comments on that article, didn't we, Christine?
Right. Christine suggested narcissism is a spectrum, and therapy only really works if the person wants to change, which she felt most don't. She mentioned Wendy Beharry's work, who specializes in this.
But Lana offered a counter perspective, questioning if childhood trauma is the only cause based on her family.
Yeah, a good reminder that it's likely complex, not just one single pathway.
And Donna's example of her sibling constantly putting down her achievements.
A concrete example of how that shame and envy can play out, making others feel small to make themselves feel bigger, perhaps.
Which brings us neatly to the psychotherapy article. It also highlights shame right alongside rage as central in NTD.
Yes, it really doubles down on shame being a core experience. Defining it as that awful feeling of not measuring up, fearing exposure, feeling inadequate at your core.
And it suggests extreme shame can be really destructive.
Hugely. Leading potentially to self-harm or harming others. It underlies depression, alienation, self-doubt, perfectionism, and of course, narcissistic disorders.
And it talks about that shame rage dynamic again.
Right, the idea that shame gets transformed into anger because anger might feel more powerful, more tolerable than the vulnerability of shame or envy, which can feel helpless.
So rage is a defense against shame and hubris, excessive pride.
Another defense, according to this article, used against external threats. They might want to destroy anyone who doubts their grandiosity because it threatens to expose that underlying vulnerability.
The small, vulnerable, and weak self that's hidden underneath.
Precisely. Pride itself can function as a shield. And to keep feeling pride and avoid shame, they tend to focus intensely on themselves, taking credit for success and blaming failure on external things.
Interestingly, this article mentioned using shame in therapy. How would that work?
Carefully, I imagine. But the idea is perhaps to use it for reality testing, maybe as motivation for change, exploring what's driving the behavior. Even suggesting therapeutic humor could help uncover unconscious shame.
It's complex. The article ends by contrasting that lack of real empathy and emotional depth with the outward arrogance, that internal conflict again.
It really emphasizes that divide.
Okay, finally, let's look at narcissistic projection. Simply, psychology explains this one.
Yeah, basically it's a defense mechanism. They avoid their own flaws by attributing those same flaws to other people.
To protect that perfect image.
Exactly. Protect the grandiose self. While projection is a general psychological thing, we all might do it sometimes, narcissistic projection is specific. It's tied to those narcissistic traits. Grandiosity, lack of empathy. It helps them avoid responsibility, maintain the facade, and deflect criticism.
Can you give an example?
The article gives clear ones, like a narcissist who is fundamentally dishonest might constantly accuse others of lying.
Or someone envious accusing others of being jealous of them.
Precisely. It's turning the tables.
And crucially, the article offers advice for dealing with it.
Yes. Remember, their projection is about them, not you. That's key.
Don't internalize it.
Right. Practice self-awareness, know your own reality, maintain frame boundaries, and importantly, you don't always have to engage or defend yourself against every accusation. Sometimes disengaging is the best strategy.
That's really practical advice. Okay, so wrapping this all up, what does it mean for you, our listener?
Well, hopefully this deep dive has offered a clearer picture, even if it's a more complex one. Narcissism isn't simple.
Definitely not black and white. It's not just about whether they feel guilt or not. That internal world seems like, well, a battleground often. Insecurity hidden by grandiosity.
And understanding the role of that deep, often hidden shame and how defenses like projection work, that offers really critical insights into the behavior you might encounter.
Gaining that understanding really feels like the first essential step if you're navigating these kinds of interactions or relationships.
Absolutely. Knowledge is power here.
So if you found this exploration helpful and you want to dive deep into other complex topics with us, please do subscribe to the channel. We'd love to have you along.
Yeah, definitely subscribe.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive today. It's been fascinating. Goodbye for now.
And thank you for listening. We hope it's been useful. Until next time.